Many times when we are not talking, we think that we're listening, but really we're often waiting for that person to finish talking so we can talk. But we don't use energy and attention, awareness to process what they are saying. So how do we actively listen? The first is give the speaker your full attention. 80% eye contact keeps you engaged. Many times when we are talking, we can tend to look away. Then when we are listening, you can tell when you stop listening by if your eyes drift away from the person. By keeping eye contact with them 80% of the time, you are focused on the flow of conversation. Being able to pay attention to someone helps you truly understand what they're expressing, because our nonverbal functioning processes 10 times quicker than our verbal. So even if someone is telling you something, your ability to pay attention to their body language, what they're doing, will help you holistically understand what's going on. So 80% eye contact keeps you engaged. Also, most of our sensory neurons are visuals. When someone is talking, if they see that you are looking at them, they're going to feel more connected, versus if they are talking and you're looking around, they're going to know that you're disengaged. You want to reflect back key points, simple summaries like, so what you're saying is, or if I understood you correctly, or my understanding of this is. Those are all simple summaries to reflect back. Pretend you are a mirror and someone steps in front of it, and then you are meant to recount what you saw when they stepped in front of it. That is reflecting back what someone says. I use this exercise particularly with couples who struggle with communication skills. The way the exercise goes is that one person will share. The other person must reflect back what that person said to the degree of satisfaction of the person who shared it. And they cannot move on in the conversation until that happens. And then they switch and the other person shares. And then the other person reflects back their understanding of what was said. Then that person waits until it is effectively reflected back. The main point in this is not to get to who's right, who's wrong, solutions-based. It's a true desire and goal to understand who someone is when they are speaking. How do you understand them? By reflecting back your sense of where they were coming from. What you're really saying is, I see you and I understand you. We have to start there. Next, pause before responding. This prevents knee-jerk reactions and ensures a thoughtful exchange. Active listening isn't just about silence, it's about engagement. A well-paced nod, an intentional question, or a brief reflection fosters dialogue. If you just take 10 seconds to say, I will breathe a few deep breaths before I respond, it's almost always going to be worth it, because you need time to process what that person said. We live in a culture that puts pressure to immediately respond, to fill in the silence because it's awkward. Let it ride. Give it space so it can breathe, so that your understanding of what that person said can be fully acknowledged. When someone is sharing something, especially if it's meaningful, have a longer pause. They're telling you about a family member getting sick or going through a breakup. Taking a few moments to sit and soak it in is important. Us men often try to fill the gap because we try to problem solve. Well, what should I say? Maybe I should just provide a solution. But many times it starts with you just pausing and acknowledging what has been said. It also helps you be more conscious in your response to them in a more deep and meaningful way. In a previous video on emotional intelligence, I talk about the importance of creating a gap between the stimulus and response. Stimulus being when someone is sharing, the response being your response. The longer gap you have, the better. That just doesn't stand true for emotional regulation. It also stands true for active listening. Number 2, expressing yourself with clarity and confidence. I would say active listening is the most overlooked trait when it comes to communication skills, because it also applies to yourself. Your ability to listen to your own life, your thoughts and your emotions will allow you to communicate, but it's difficult to have meaningful connection. I would argue impossible if you do not have the ability to actively listen to somebody. But obviously you have to talk. How do you express yourself with clarity and confidence? So point A is taming long-windedness. I'm from the South. This is a staple. This is a personality trait. When you're born long-winded. Long-windedness suggests you haven't refined your thoughts. When you're long-winded, you are not conscious of the dialogue you're saying. It's aimless processing. It's unrefined expression. There is no rhyme or reason. There's no direction. There's no end goal. There's no structure. It's just whatever. Oftentimes, long-windedness happens in people that are nervous. They tend to become unaware of themselves and they just start talking and sharing. Long-windedness happens in people with narcissistic traits who tend to assume that people want to listen to them and only them and what they share as being the most important thing. And it can also happen with people who are lonely, who don't talk to a lot of people, who don't have strong social connections. They tend to let it all out in the few social connections that they do have. The things that you need to ask yourself to prevent yourself from being long-winded are: 1, when do I ramble the most? There may be certain triggers or times where you find yourself most rambling. That may be when you are meeting new people. That may be when you are at work. Try to improve yourself. You want to share. That may be when you are nervous about a particular situation, so you ramble. The second question: what triggers me to over-explain? Understanding when you feel the need to overcompensate, to over-explain. Why is that? Am I insecure with the present moment? Do I not feel safe with this person? Am I nervous in how I'm coming across? So I got to make sure that they definitely understand me. And then lastly, what's my long-windedness rating? This should be a game show. This week on long-winded, rating people's long-windedness on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being I barely do it, it's brief, or 10, this is my default mode of communicating. Every time I open my mouth, it becomes long-winded. Those are some questions to ask yourself. Number 2, the power of concise messages. Skip to the heart of the message. Deliver your point in 2 to 3 sentences. Make your point and zip it. Stop talking once your message is clear. Allow space for dialogue. You do this by using concise sentences. Ditch jargon. You're going to want to think about, before you talk, what is the main point I'm trying to communicate here? And find a threshold that tells yourself, once I reach this point, I no longer need to talk. I don't undertalk. I don't overtalk. I talk just enough. I share just enough to be able to communicate my point. This happens in 2 to 3 sentences. As we go through this, it's going to be tempting to think you're doing better than you are. That's human condition. Most of what we struggle with, we are terribly inaccurate with realizing the degree we actually struggle with something. This is going to take humility, patience, and true brutal honesty, because it may feel brutal, for you to review this and see how often you try to make a point beyond 2 or 3 sentences. Even if you're not long-winded in the extreme form, you certainly may be long-winded relevant to your own life and environment. Part of it is cultural, where you live in the U.S. if you're in the States. Part of it is as a country, we like to express ourselves. So that's just something to keep in mind. Ditch the jargon. No one needs a TikTok trend in the way that you trying to use confusing phrases that no one really relates to or understands is not going to be helpful. You're not cutting it off. You're not terminating it. You're just ending the sentence. Think about how often your sentence would have a comma or a phrase like and, but, or. Try to put a period there. Make your sentences shorter and more concise. The third point, the strength of clear points. Structure your message into 2 or 3 key ideas. You have one main point, and within that main point, you have 2 or 3 sub points that you are speaking to within that. See it as a roadmap. You have an ultimate destination. Let's say you have 2 to 3 roads to get there. You start with this is going to be the beginning, or there are 2 things to consider. Of everything that this person is saying, this is going to be 2 main takeaways. It preps somebody. Part of the issue with communication is when you don't make it predictable. That person feels threatened and caught off guard, so they're a lot less likely to feel safe and secure to be able to truly hear you. And they're also spending energy trying to predict what you're going to say. So by laying out the groundwork and providing predictability, it can put them at ease. It's like when someone is giving a talk and they say, this will be about 30 minutes. Even if you're pissed that it's 30 minutes long, at least now you know. Versus someone that doesn't give you a heads up and it becomes an hour. And you're like, what the hell? Like, what's going on? We're just going on and on. The fourth is confidence of well-paced pauses. If you don't pause, that equals long-windedness. If someone is not taking a breath, first of all, call a dang ambulance because they're probably going to pass out soon. But 2, they are long-winded. We need pauses. It's similar to reading an email or a text that has no breaks in it. It's just constant text, a huge block. We just immediately get overwhelmed. We look at it and we tap out. No, I'm not reading that. It's the same with communication. If we do not pause, we immediately get exhausted or overwhelmed as the listener of the person not pausing. And we tune out. Pauses also create a confident cadence and add impact. By pausing, you are leaving room to enunciate the words that you just said, and you give time for people to interpret, process, resonate with those. If there's no pause, you're just going. There's no time to do that. So no one can sit or interpret or acknowledge what you're saying because there's no breath to. The last component here is no pauses gives this sense of unsettledness, of hurry, of never ending. These are things that we don't like to experience as humans. We need a dang break. It would be like continually walking and never stopping. Eventually, that person's going to pass out or give up and just sit down. Your ability to stop and pause not only creates that confidence, but it allows people time to resonate, and it brings a calming sense and spirit to the conversation where someone feels like they're not just trying to play catch up or feel hurried along to keep up. What are some tips? Pause at sentence ends. If there's a period, pause. If you're done making a point, pause. Even if you're in the middle of a sentence and you feel the need to pause, pause. The pause helps you stay on track at a good pace with talking. If you have no pause, you're off pace, period. On the flip side, though, you want to avoid mid-thought pauses because that shows you're not aware of what you're talking about or you're uncertain. You want to seem confident. You want to feel assured. You don't want to come across as uneasy or uncertain. So while you can pause in the middle of a sentence if you need to, catch up and make sure you know where you're at. Don't pause mid-thought. For example, you're starting to share. You say, what'd you do yesterday? And you answer, I went to school and then I came home and I cooked and the meal was incredible. If someone's going to look at you, hello, anyone there? Don't pause mid-thought. Finally, use pauses to separate key ideas. As we process things, we need to know when one thing begins and when one thing ends. If you're constantly talking and you're long-winded, there is no breaking it up, so you don't know where to categorize things and therefore place them and see the role and the function that they're playing in the conversation. By pausing, you are letting them know, in a sense, there's an intermission, like a show. The third key point is how communication strengthens relationships. So now that we've talked through the 4 key points in expressing yourself with clarity and confidence, we're going to move on to the values and the principles of how communication strengthens relationships. So strong relationships are built on clear, confident communication, because when we communicate, that first part of the word, communion, we are connected with others when we communicate in every form of the word. One way to see it is our depth of effectiveness and authenticity in our communication allows for the depth of connection and relationship that we have. It's how we relate to each other, how we communicate. Here's how we can best communicate with others in a way that strengthens relationships. The first point is eliminate fillers. Replace so, and, like, with intentional silence. It's common to use filler words. In a way, it's our subconscious buying more time to process or understand where we're coming from. But it's similar to talking out loud an idea that you have. Instead of just thinking through the idea, you say, like, right? That is your externalization of the internal state that you find yourself in. Replace those filler words with intentional silence. You're still giving yourself the space. You're still allowing time. You're simply not spilling words that don't have value. It would be like eating fast food fries before your real meal to satiate the hunger. It's not really going to fill you. It's just a shallow replacement for the real thing. Instead, stay in a fasted state, wait, and eat your meal. The second point here, use confident non-verbals. Again, these are firing off 10 times faster than your verbal communication, and most of our sensory neurons are visual. It's important that we express our non-verbals effectively. 80% eye contact in conversations, maintaining a locked-in vision with somebody as they're talking. And notice we tend to, when we are speaking, drift our eyesight. When you're speaking, attempt to look straight at them when you do. Most of the time, we look away because we're not sure what we think or feel and we need time. There's a sense of pressure because we get this immediate attention that's on us. It would be like a teacher calling on you in class when you're not ready. You want more time, so you avoid, oh God, please don't call on me. I don't know. Versus if they call on you, you have to come up with something in the moment. Being able to maintain that eye contact, being direct, it shows a confidence because you feel you are worth being paid attention to, and you feel worth looking and paying attention to someone or something. While you should do this 80% of the time in conversations, do it 99% in presentations. Don't give us a death by PowerPoint. It's important to use the slides as a visual for others and for you to occasionally look for the points you're making, but make sure that you are locked in to the audience. Next, smile. It makes you seem engaged and intelligent. When you smile, it puts people at ease. It makes people feel good. It shows that you have some emotional response to the moment. It gives a sense of lightheartedness, intelligence, a sense of bravado. Next, gesture naturally to emphasize key ideas. You'll notice politicians do this all of the time. It's this, It's this, it's this, it's this. It's using gestures to put a emphasis on whatever point you're trying to make. A fun example I've learned since being married to my wife, who is Italian American, is this. What are you talking about? Using a gesture to express is important and effective. Good communication isn't just about speaking, though it starts there. It's about connection. Think about it on a deeper level, that whatever you are expressing through your communication is some form of connection or lack of connection. When you listen actively, when you take the time to truly understand what someone's saying, reflecting it back to them, like we mentioned, when you express yourself clearly, when you're concise, when you have a main point, when you have 2 to 3 sub points within that, when you pause, when you replace the commas with a period and shorten your sentences and overall communication. When you communicate confidently, when you make eye contact, when you smile, when you use gestures, this shows you are engaged, that you are skillful. You build trust, respect, and stronger relationships overall. Mastering communication isn't just about talking. It's about making your words count. By being concise, structured, and confident, you create space for meaningful dialogue and stronger relationships. I want to speak to one last point here that many people struggle with, which is, how do I handle someone who is long-winded? Oftentimes, someone who is long-winded is not aware of it, and they are usually more emotionally fragile, and you can't address it directly. So what do? The first is to be aware of how often they do it. A tall tale sign, if someone is being long-winded, is they tend to jump in right away and start talking. They often do not ask you questions. They don't pause, and they often look away, usually out of an insecurity or a nervousness. Because if they looked at you, they would pick up visually that you are uninterested or disconnected or not engaged. So they're just looking away, and they're not talking to you. They're talking at you. They're talking beyond you. They're talking to themselves, really. So what do you do in a situation like that? Well, it depends on how close you are to the person. If this is a parent or a close family member, it's more complicated. You're going to have to choose your battles, and you're going to have to go about it more effectively with a lot of patience and compassion. If you don't know someone well, then it's a little easier just to shut them down. Let's start with if it's a family member or someone close to you. You're going to plan to do something in the moment, as well as a more intentional conversation outside of the moment. In the moment, when someone's doing that, allow them to share a little bit. But when they start really rambling and getting off track, maybe they start to tell you about their day, and then it becomes talking about the neighbor's dog surgery or this random event that happened in the news. Put up your hand like this to give them a visual cue and gently interrupt them. This is going to be uncomfortable for those of you who are conflict avoidant, but gently interrupt them and say, hey, sorry to interrupt. I'm just noticing we're getting a little off track here. I'm wondering if we could get back to you sharing about your day. Oh, yeah. So they'll probably ramble again, and you might have to do it again. You have to feel out how many times you think it would be worth interrupting. Then part of it is you asserting your sense of place in the conversation by just starting to share about what's going on with you. This will feel very forced, unnatural, and awkward, but it's important that you do it because you are remodeling healthy communication. Oftentimes, people who have long-winded family members in their life feel despair or hopelessness. This person's never going to change. I don't connect with them. What's the point of trying? Let me just tune out. I felt all those things before, but you don't want to live in perpetual disappointment. You want to connect where you can and make a concerted effort where you can. So start to jump in, and then you just start to share. My day was also good. I was able to do this and that. If you are someone that's not as assertive and you are overly agreeable, this will be awkward for you, maybe painfully. You have to believe that this is an effective way to respond. If you just let that person steamroll you, you will get resentful, you will get cynical, and you will get judgmental. You don't want that. If you've done it a few times and you've tried to share and they continue to ramble, you have a choice. You can see you listening to the rambling as an act of love to let that person be where they're at. God bless you. I don't have that much patience. I wouldn't do it. I would end the conversation. Oftentimes we think, well, but I don't talk to this person that often, or I don't feel connected to them. But the question is, just because I give more time to communicate doesn't mean that communication is effective in a way that helps us feel connected, like what we were talking about earlier. It's more important that you cut off the conversation at the point where the conversation is no longer connected, then you're living in reality, that point still, and you try again next time. Everyone's range is different on patience and how long-winded that person is. There's a lot of factors at play. There's no easy answer, and it's going to be messy, but try to do that. That's in the moment. Now, the second piece here that you're going to do is to have an intentional conversation outside of them being long-winded. I had mine with my person 2.5 years ago. I used this exercise where I imagine myself on my deathbed and I ask myself, will I regret not having this conversation, as hard as it is? And I did think I would regret it. So I sat down with this person and I started the conversation by saying, hey, I want to bring up something that I've noticed that has negatively impacted me. I'm bringing it up because I love and care about you and I want us to connect on a deeper, more meaningful level. I'm also not saying you are only this issue. In fact, I'm bringing it up because it's an issue. It's not who you are. I just ask that you refrain from getting defensive or assuming and just hear me out. And then I want to give you time to respond and hear you out as well. You set the stage, you set the tone. Then I go into it and I say, oftentimes I have observed, so going back to a last video that talks about the 3 rules in couples counseling, one of them is to use I language, not you. I have observed that when you speak and communicate, it's often rambly and long-winded. I often feel exhausted, confused, and frustrated when I hear you. And I don't want that because I care about you and I want to know what's going on in your life. But I feel like the way that you communicate is preventing me from being able to do that. And I realize some of this is my impatience and inability to give you space to be able to communicate. But I want to be clear that this isn't just a personal preference of how I think you should communicate or what I think's right. This isn't a judgment. It's an objective piece of feedback that we know if we could all be more concise and clear and direct in our communication, it would allow for deeper connection, which is what I'm aiming for here. Again, I don't want you to take this as a judgment as much as it is something that you could improve on if you're open to seeing that. And I'm wondering where you're coming from in being long-winded. Even if you wouldn't call it long-winded, let's say, what's behind the motivation and meaning and perspective about how you communicate? Can you speak to that? This person said, well, I just really like connecting with people. I like people knowing how much I relate to them. So I feel like by sharing that we're doing that. Okay. In my mind, what happens there, of course, this is just in my mind, I'm not sharing this. This person has a reverse understanding of connection. They are interpreting connection as the ability to talk and for someone else to know them. But what they're telling me is that by doing that, they feel connected to someone else. Interesting. Okay. I log that. Then I break that down and respond to that. Okay. So we say, okay, thank you for sharing that. We're validating what they're saying. I can see where you're coming from, and not but. My understanding of how we connect with people is to share, but also to be heard. My observation and experience has been when we talk and interact, I'm rarely heard. I'm rarely asked questions. I often feel I don't share much, and it feels painful because I want you to know my life. I want you to know what's going on. I want to share my vulnerability and my feelings and my life with you. But I often feel like I don't have that space because you tend to talk for most of the time in the conversation. Then you ask, can you see where I'm coming from in that, and see what they say. Then after you've gone through that, you want to move into a time of planning for how to move forward. You say something like, I can understand that this was a lot. I know that we'll both be continuing to process this after, but I'm wondering if we could talk about how we may best move forward from this experience now that we've had this conversation. I'm wondering if you are open to growing and being more concise and direct in your communication. If you would like me to play a role in that. Do you want me to give you a cue? Want me to give you feedback? Or do you want me to just be more hands-off and let you learn this and go about it on your own? I want to know how I can best be here for you. It's important to reinstate that the entire reason you're bringing this up is out of care and out of a desire to more deeply connect with this person. Then maybe they say, yeah, give me feedback. Okay. When would you like that? How? And talk about the details of how you can support them. If they say, no, I'm just going to do it on my own. All right. You say, what would mean a lot to me is if when we're in conversation, if you're starting to be long-winded, that I could feel safe enough to jump in and try to redirect us. Please know it wouldn't be a personal attack, but more so a necessary reflection point, like pinball, redirecting, reflecting the conversation back to the original point. So depending on what that person is open to, your suggestions as far as how you can support them, then you can provide some options depending on it. You want to end with gratitude. I just want to say, I know this conversation wasn't easy. Acknowledge it may have felt uncomfortable for you. It was a little for me because I care about you. I love you. I want what's best for you. And I don't know it all. I'm just sharing the knowledge I know of what works. And I want to see if we can both act out of that place. And I'm thankful that you were able to hear me out, see where I was coming from, and see where you may be coming from, and be open to changing, to addressing any issues, to moving forward in a more effective, connected way in how we communicate. And you can always leave with also offering something on your end. And I know I'm far from perfect, so I'm committing to you to be concise, direct, and clear in my communication. And when I'm not, please let me know, because I want to make sure that we're connecting as deeply as we can. And I feel like with the current way that we communicate, I tend to shut down, tune out, get frustrated. And that makes me sad. I don't want to experience those things with you because I love you. Again, you're reaffirming and I want to connect with you. And you thank him again for the conversation. Give him a nice hug. You move on. So that's how you would handle a situation with someone who is long-winded. I would say the majority of the focus should be on your own communication style and where you can improve. Go back and take these steps one by one and practice with people close to you. Practice through writing. Writing is a form of speaking. So the question I'll leave you with today is, what's one communication habit you're going to work on? Of all those components, what's the one you're going to take away and work on? I'll put resources in the show notes. Thanks again, and see you next time on The Mature Male.